All right, so let's talk about morality in One Piece. Because of everything that's been going on with Garp, with everything that's been going on with Rocks, with Emu, and where we're at in the story right now, there's been a lot of questions about One Piece being political. There's been a lot of questions about Luffy being a political hero. There's been a lot of politics around One Piece, and I'm gonna stress this because there are some idiots out there that think I don't think One Piece is political. One Piece is very political. There is so much politics in One Piece, it's actually overwhelming. For you to say that One Piece is not political means you've not been reading the story. It doesn't make any sense to say One Piece is not political when we have people all over the world, people in Nepal, people in Indonesia, people who are all using the flag to go against their own tyrannical governments, right? I'm not, an expert when it comes to Nepal and Indonesia, so really take my word with a grain of salt, but to say One Piece is not political is ridiculous. So I just want to establish that point before we get into this discussion, because I'm finding myself having constant discussions with my community, with the chat, on Twitter about the morality of One Piece and about morality in general, because it seems as though One Piece addresses morality in a very strange way, and I just think it's a good platform to talk about this. We should talk about this in a video. I regret to inform you, but now it is time for an ad break. This video is sponsored by Cooper. That was me, 2024, out here paying full price like an idiot. No cashback, no coupons, no help. That man didn't know about Cooper, the AI-powered shopping assistant that does everything but click buy now for you. You install it, make an account, and boom, you've just leveled up financially. When I hit the checkout now, Cooper shows up, scans the internet like a coupon detective, and hits me with the best deal automatically. Past me would have cried seeing how much I saved. 76,000 stores offer cash back. I shop like normal. Activate Cooper and I get paid. PayPal, gift card, bank, it don't matter. Even the villain agenda appreciates. And the price comparison tool? Nah, man, that's personal. I was about to drop 89 bones. And Cooper was like, nah, brother, it's 62 over here. Don't be like him. Be better. Smarter shoppers use Cooper. Ready to save instantly? Grab Cooper now. Free to install and max savings. Links in the description box below. One of the things that we know about morality, right? So, I believe in Jesus. I'm a religious man. So at the end of the day, morality comes from God, from me. Now in One Piece, there is no real religion. There is no God. There's Kuma and Nikkaism and whatever that is. Or it's clear allegory to a Catholic priest, right? So we can push that aside. But if we're talking about morality here, we're talking about good versus evil. What do we deem as good and what do we deem as evil? For me, in the One Piece world, right? Good and bad is a spectrum. No one is completely good and no one is completely bad. Now there are some people in the story that you would probably pull at the far end of the spectrum, but let's just if we were to have a visual, and let's just think about this for a second. Right side is good, left side is evil, right? We have the spectrum. And when it comes to the world of One Piece, a lot of people say things like the Marines are the bad guys, the Marines are the antagonists, and that's because how Oda has written his story has made it seem as though the Marines are always in the antagonistic role rather than the protagonistic role, because Luffy is our protagonist and Luffy is a pirate. So a lot of the times if you're reading One Piece and you're just reading it because you enjoy the story and you want to go along in the journey, Luffy and the Straw Hats are the good guys. Shanks is the good guy. And most of the time, the Marines are either the bad guys or they're an antagonist that are getting in the way, right? You have Enies Lobby, right? The Marines are the bad guys in Enies Lobby. Earlier on with Captain Morgan, villain. Heck, Arlong. The Marines that were involved with the Arlong Park arc, villains. Most of the Marines that show up for whatever reason are either a little bit ratty, a little bit scummy, or part of a corrupt system. So you would argue until we get to Smoker, where you're seeing someone who's actually trying to represent the good side of the Marines and chasing after Luffy, even then, Smoker's kind of being put in an antagonistic position. After Alabasta, the Marines are taking credit. You go to Dressrosa, right? The Marines aren't the villains here, Dofi is, but Dofi's also working with the world government, so technically the Marines can't do anything. So there's a lot of times where we see the Marines as antagonists. There's a lot of times where people are just assuming the Marines are bad people, but then when you look at characters like Kobe and you see Kobe's ambition after he dealt with Zoro and Luffy, Kobe is good. Kobe wants to join the Marines. And after the whole Captain Morgan issue, there are good Marines that take over and then oversee the town, and then Kobe joins those Marines. And those Marines accept Kobe, even though they low-key already know that he was working with the pirates. But because these Marines, these regular, everyday Marines, naturally are good people. They at least try to be good people. They want to protect. They want to serve. I think another way to highlight this as well is the One Piece fan letter. The One Piece fan letter, I'd say, is one of the best things that we've ever received that's not canon. To me, the One Piece fan letter is canon. To me, the One Piece fan letter represents the world around us that we literally do not see, as the Straw Hats are going all about doing all these crazy things. And in that One Piece letter, the Marines are the ones who are the normal, everyday people showing up, suffering at the hands of these toxically powerful pirates and these overpowered crack admirals. The Marines are the regular guys, the little guy. Now, I want to stress this here when we're getting into the conversation. There is a difference between what One Piece asserts as morally good, or, morally on the right side, and what the world views as morally on the right side, right? Because we can get into conspiracy theories and corrupt government and upper society Masonry and all kinds of different things, right? And that would just be a really long video, and then we'd get into like Freemasonry and Hoteps and Illuminati nonsense, and I don't want to get into that, right? Because that's not my field. That's for y'all, bro. I like the way my life is right now. But I wanted to talk about that dichotomy here. If we're gonna take categories of pirates that we deem as good, we're thinking about Shanks for the most part. We're thinking about Luffy. We're thinking about Whitebeard because Whitebeard hasn't done anything bad on screen. We don't really know anything bad that Whitebeard's done. Roger's questionable. He killed Squad's crew members. Ace hasn't done anything bad-ish on screen, right? So Ace is kind of good, but I don't know. Law's done bad things. At the end of the day, Law is more of a pirate than Luffy, I'd argue. Law's not exactly a good guy. He's just good because he's allied with the Straw Hats. Kid, he's bad. Let's not talk about Houston's Kid. He was crucifying civilians. He's terrible. He's not a good person. Apu, not a good person. Hawkins, not a good person. Drake, ex-Marine, I don't know what he's doing. He's in Sword. He's useless. Let's not even talk about Drake. But then if we get into other pirates, Big Mom, evil. Kaido, evil. Arlong, evil. Although Arlong, you can understand where he's coming from, he still was completely enslaving human beings, killing mothers, and all kinds of other stuff out of pure hatred. He's a product of racism. We understand, still bad. If we're talking about just some of the pirates that we've listed off, there's other pirates like Crocodile and the Warlord system, right? They're under the world government. But we're talking about Marines here. So we're talking about Garp. A lot of the times people will say you're a bad by association because you're working for a corrupt government. So we're talking about people like Kobe being bad. People like Garp being bad. People like Aokiji, who people would deem as bad. I wouldn't deem him as bad really because I haven't seen him do anything evil. But then he left the Marine, so now people think Kuzan is good, but then he joins Blackbeard. So I was like, okay, so is he good or bad? Which one is he? You could say gray. Then you get into Smoker. I didn't call Smoker bad. I wouldn't call Tashigi bad. I wouldn't call Fujitora bad. Green Bull, awkward. Yeah, he's pretty bad. Akainu, again, he killed his own subordinate for deserting. Now, in martial law, desertion is a very grievous crime, and back in the day, you normally were killed for deserting, so there's also that. But I mean, from the story's perspective, he's pretty antagonistic. But then people talk about like, well, what about his backstory? And I'm just like, listen, someone like Akainu who has a personal conviction of absolute justice. The problem with absolute justice is that there's no room for nuance, and when there's no room for nuance, if you follow the wrong indoctrination, your justice can actually be deemed evil and counterproductive, and that's dangerous because then you get into things like Nazism and Aryanism, and you're getting into what's going on in the world right now, right, where people are finding ways to justify genocide and murder of children. If I speak, you know what I'm talking about. So these things, that indoctrination, no matter what you deem as absolute justice, when innocent civilians and children are being murdered and butchered and maimed, and innocent people are dying because of your indoctrination, but you call it absolute justice, I'm sorry, buddy, but that's a little bit evil. All right, I just think that's pretty straightforward. Now, maybe that's just my own morality projecting it, but I think just valuing human life in general should be the bare minimum when it comes to our morality. I think human life having value should be the bare minimum. So if we're gonna go by that, a lot of people can misconstrue pirates as not being the bad guys and Marines being the bad guys. But if you look at it in totality, every island that Luffy goes to, they're scared of them because they are pirates. Why? Because your average pirate is a terrible human being. Your average pirate is pillaging, plundering, murdering, stealing, all kinds of things that pirates do. They're just not good people. They're rowdy. When Luffy comes in and proves to people that, wait, you're actually good pirates? I didn't know there was good pirates. Can you imagine every day? It's funny, as a black person, I've dealt with this. You just walk up and people just like, you're not what I expected you to be. Well, what have you been exposed to? And I'm not using this as an example for racist people to just assume black people all follow the same stereotype, but me being black has nothing to do with my morality here because that's not my role in life. I'm not a criminal. I'm not operating as a gang member. Now, if I was a gang member and black, that's a different story, but I'm not. I don't know where I'm going with this. It seems like dangerous rhetoric, but I'm just going to ride through with it and hope people understand what I'm trying to say here. However, there is the role of the pirate. Now, what do pirates do in general? If we're talking about our basic definition of a pirate is someone who just doesn't follow rules. A pirate is someone that takes what they want, does what they want, and moves around, sails the seas without any regard for the law whatsoever. That is what Luffy is. In this world, Luffy is deemed as good and righteous because he's free. Here's the problem with the concept of freedom that One Piece tries to present sometimes. Freedom without order is anarchy. And once you're doing something like sailing the 7 seas and sailing the Grand Line, and you're not adhering to any laws whatsoever, you're going against order. And that's fine as long as you're not harming anyone, which is what Luffy normally does all of the time because he's naturally a good person. The Straw Hats are naturally good people. But there are people who are sailing the seas, following the same ideology as freedom, but they're not good people. Blackbeard, not a good guy. Stabbed Thatch, does whatever he wants, takes what he wants, destroys an entire town just to capture Ace. Not a good person. They ran into Drum Island, Raxat, Drum Island. Like, Blackbeard is not a good guy. I love Blackbeard. He's evil. Blackbeard is an evil person, and he is a pirate. And Blackbeard falls under the basic definition of a pirate, which is why a lot of people get so angry at Garp, because it's like, how could you let Ace die? Because he's a pirate. He's a criminal. Ace is a criminal by the definition of the law and by the definition of a pirate, but he just happens to be a good criminal. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's just not how the narrative is presented, so we should just follow the narrative. I understand that. The only problem is that with One Piece, we can't talk about One Piece being political. We can't talk about One Piece being so relevant to the real world events, but then have a complete cognitive dissonance between morality in this fictional story versus how morality actually is in the real world. Because at the end of the day, you can attribute pirate members to being gang members. So if there is a drug lord, for example, and I've used this example before. I'm a drug lord. I don't kill people, but drugs is a little aggressive. Let's do gang member. No matter what, if you're distributing drugs, you're hurting people. I'm a part of a gang. I've created my own gang of guys, and all we do is walk around, just hang out randomly. We loiter. Sometimes we'll steal a bottle of liquor and just laugh. LOL. We're not heroes, but at the same time, if I see some other gang members jumping an innocent person, I'm gonna beat the gang members up. And then the person who I say just happens to own a halal shop, and he gives me free lamb over rice. And I was like, man, look at these guys here. The Rat Gang. Yeah, we're calling them the Rat Gang. The Rat Gang. These guys are so good, man, because all they do is they loiter, they litter, they steal sometimes, but they protect us all, and they're good people. So to me, and to maybe to the neighborhood, I'm a good guy. But to the law, I'm a gang member. I still steal. I don't hurt nobody. I don't hurt innocent civilians. In fact, I save innocent civilians. So technically, I'm a good guy, but I'm still a gang member. So if other people are affected by other gangs of violence, and a gang member killed someone's son, a gang member killed somebody's daughter, and then I run up to those people and say, hey, I'm a gang member, this is my gang, we don't do that. Instantly, they're gonna be like, oh, but you're an evil person because you're a gang member, and gangs ruined my life, and gangs ruined my family. I may be a good person, but technically, I'm still a gang member. I still am under that affiliation as a gang member. So at the end of the day, just because I am a good gang member does not mean that I represent what is good by my title. And I think a lot of people get misconstrued with that, because then if there are police officers, because we know there's issues with the police out there. There are police officers that arrest the bad gang members. There's police officers that care about their neighborhood. There's police officers that protect their neighborhood. Those police officers are arresting those gang members and keeping their neighborhood safe. But because there are other police officers and there's other government institutions that allow unarmed killings and all kinds of other evil things that we've seen from the police institution, then we're like, well, I don't got a problem with the gang members because there's this one good gang member, but all the police are bad. All of them are bad. That's it. And mind you, we have that kind of currently in today. But do you see where that issue is coming in here? Where it's like, okay, so which one is the right side? Now, the overarching story of One Piece is promoting that because of the overall establishment, the things that Luffy does is going to ultimately free the world of that overarching establishment. But if you take Luffy out of the narrative, and you're talking about the world of pirates, and you're talking about the world of Marines, and you're talking about the basic morality of the Marines on a spectrum versus the basic morality of the pirates, the Marines are more good than the pirates in general. Is that how we view the story? I don't think so. So I think there needs to be a discussion about that, because then what happens is, so let's use Rox as a character study. We have Rox who is murdered a Marine. We have Rox that has stabbed a child in Loki. Whether he fought the child or not doesn't give him a right to stab him. It's just in general, you just don't stab children. When he tried to get Harold's attention, what does he do? He used a full-blown conqueror's attack on a child. I don't care if he's a giant, he's a child. He knew it was Harold's kid, and he attacked him and said, that'll bring Harold out. That's not something a good person does. It's not good. It's just not good. We don't do that here. That's not how we get down. That's not okay. Rox is not a good guy, period. Shiki, not a good guy. Big Mom, there's no need for an example. Big Mom's not a good person. Kaido, not a good person. But because now we see that Rox has a family. We see that Rox has a son. He has a wife. We like his wife. Rox cares about something that we all would normally care about. All of a sudden reminds us, you know what, man? Rox isn't that bad of a guy. I don't know if I'd call Rox a villain. I think I'd call him neutral. And I'm just like, here we are calling Garp this inexcusable allower of slavery, but Rox is a good guy. And I get so confused by that, but I think that's just how the story gets written sometimes, where because we're only seeing the perspective of the better sides of these pirates per se, that we tend to blur the lines and think the Marines are just the big bad. Some people think the Marines are Nazis. I think that's just very aggressive. I just think that at the end of the day, the highest level level of the government in the world government is evil. The Gorosei are evil. When it comes to the spectrum, they're all the way on the left. Emu, evil. Celestial dragons, they're before the Gorosei just because they're ignorant and they're stupid. They're actually genuinely remedial and have no understanding of society whatsoever. The Gorosei have understanding of society and they're evil and they're willingly doing it, and then Emu's just whatever. He's a freak of nature. So you have that side. If you had the Marines, I would low-key put the Marines all the way back on the right side and maybe move them a little closer to the middle, maybe even farther. And then you'd have Luffy and the Straw Hats on the farther side, but I'd have pirates on this left side here, maybe near the middle. I would actually argue there are some pirates that have gone past and are like right before the Celestial Dragons. There are some pirates that are there. Like if you look at Orochi, where y'all putting Orochi on the scale? I want you to think about that. Orochi, not really a pirate, was in league with pirates. What Kaido was doing, where would you put Kaido on the scale? Where would you put Big Mom on the scale? Where would you put Arlong on the scale? I really am curious about that. I'm asking genuinely, where would you put Arlong on that scale? Bellamy, where would you put him on that scale? Bartolomeo, he's done bad things, but he's a Straw Hat fan. Where would you put him on that scale? Nico Robin. Now, Nico Robin, we don't think she's a bad person at all, but the things she's done, she's killed people. She was an assassin, but she was forced into that. Her backstory was awful. A lot of us think Akainu is evil, but we don't know what his backstory is. What if his backstory's like Robin? Then what? If we don't think Robin's bad for the stuff that she did in the past, what about that? We should think about that stuff for a second. I just wanted to pose that conversation. This probably deserves a long discussion and probably a collab video to discuss this, right? Because I'm really summarizing things a lot here. But what I really wanted us to do is really think about it. Because to me, if I were to give my final takeaway, I think One Piece and morality is so, the lines are so blurry that it's so dangerous to base your morality off One Piece. People try to make One Piece as black and white as possible when One Piece is not black and white at all. The only thing that is black and white about One Piece is Luffy and the Celestial Dragons. Everything else, there's no black and white for the most part, and you have your spectrum here and there. It's just a much more nuanced discussion than we care to have, but I want people to think about this stuff. I want people to talk about it. What do you think about pirates? And what do you really think about Marines? And why do you think Marines are bad? I don't really think the Marines are bad. They're just literally under a leadership that is corrupt, and the leadership itself needs to change. But I don't think the Marines need to change. Personally, I don't think the Marines need to change. Maybe Akainu needs to change, but I think the leadership above the Marines needs to change, and then that in course will change the Marines itself. That's how I see it. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll catch you guys later. Thank you.